It's always sad when a game comes to an end, when a dev team can't sustainably justify dragging something out that has been worked on for years and years. And for quite some time, Life is Feudal was a massive game in the medieval market. Almost a standalone persistent world mod for Mount and Blade if you played that sort of thing, but with so much more depth and character. It was so popular and so beloved for different reasons, but with a mix of a lack of player base, poor management and agreement issues, Life is Feudal MMO has finally come to an end. The game is being shut down for good. But before we delve into why the game shut down, let me give some context and backstory to Life is Feudal and the franchise in general. In November of 2015, Bitbox Limited released a game called Life is Feudal Your Own, a hardcore realistic medieval multiplayer sandbox RPG. I know, how many tags do you need? The game displayed similarities to other multiplayer RPGs before it, but there was nothing quite the same, especially not in the medieval genre, a community that grew massively since the release of the initial Life is Feudal Your Own game. I remember when it came out, I played it so much. I even made a few videos on it if you want to go and check them out, but be warned, they are pretty terrible. It offered great terraforming, alchemy, smithing, hunting, full seasons and weather systems, pretty much anything that you can expect from an RPG of this style. And yeah, it did have medieval combat with full formations, but I think it's safe to say it was never really as good as people wanted. But despite all its qualities, Life is Feudal Your Own wasn't perfect, and it had many faults. For starters, it was a laggy mess, especially on specific servers at the time. The UI, as well, was terrible. The engine ran badly, meaning most people, unless they had a really good computer, couldn't play it at really an acceptable frame rate. But people kind of put up with it, since, as I mentioned, there was nothing really the same, and there was still enough content for people to sink hundreds of hours into it. And trust me, they did. Moving forward to 2016 and 17, we heard Life is Feudal Your Own wasn't the end. It was more of just a test, an experiment for the devs to see how their concept would work on a smaller scale. But then we got an announcement that Life is Feudal will be re-releasing bigger than we have ever seen it before, in the form of an MMO. The hype only grew, and after seeing the map that was shown, the sheer scale compared to the previous installment was next level. People that bought Life is Feudal Your Own would even get a free copy, so everyone jumped on board that hype train. It was going to be amazing. And then it released. For all transparency, I think it's probably better if I go off script for the next section of this video and talk about what I really think about Life is Feudal MMO. First of all, I never really hated the game. I just think it was a very specific game for a very niche type of person. And unfortunately for an MMO, that doesn't work. It's called massively multiplayer for a reason. You need to be able to get the most amount of players working in tandem in order to create your game. It's not created by the mechanics or the map or the developers, it's created by the players. They tell their own stories. You could team up, make clans, you could settle and set up villages. You could also get castles and build battlements and build up your own armies. That you could have serfs that would be farming in the fields or baking it into bread in order to sustain those armies. Also blacksmiths who get iron from miners who have already been digging away in order to make weapons and armor, once again to sustain those armies. Everyone had to be working together and everybody had to be doing their job in order to really make the game work, and unfortunately the MMO didn't have that. You see, Life is Feudal Your Own, whilst it was a big game, it wasn't the size it needed to be. Yes, it had a few thousand players, but the size of the MMO, the map scale and the scale of the game in general would need to be tens of thousands of players to make it work, and it never had that. You could be walking for literal hours on end and not see a single person. You could start chopping down trees and then you could start building your base. And remember, this is an MMO, so the grind comes with it. But this sort of grind is next level. Trees would take weeks, if not months, to grow. Same with crops. Mining was an extremely slow process, and we discovered that in Life is Feudal Your Own when I played it, but it was even more so in the MMO. They almost ramped up the grind tenfold. And this sort of thing is fine if you have the player base in order to counter it. If you have tens, if not hundreds of people in a settlement or a village working with you in order to progress through the game and get enough resources in order to sustain yourselves and then conquer other factions. Furthermore, the developers decided that they wanted to get some more money from the game. Then they added in, as you guessed it, microtransactions. You could buy premium passes in the game and have almost a subscription to this MMO. This is not unheard of. Games like World of Warcraft have done this for decades at this point, but this is not World of Warcraft. I think we see this a lot. Developers have these massive visions, but they don't have the resources to carry them out, or even the skill base. Blizzard is made up of thousands of employees. Even just working on World of Warcraft is a massive scale project, and when you try and do something similar with an MMO in the medieval world, you need the resources behind it, and they had but a fraction. And this is where it comes to an end. We got the announcement today that Life is Feudal, the MMO, will be shutting down all the servers. Now, they stated in their post that it was a disagreement with some partners that they were working with. These partners gave them deals and they decided that they didn't want to take forward these deals, but that meant that they couldn't afford to keep servers up. Server costs are so expensive in MMOs, and especially a game that is so big as this in terms of its sheer mass and quantity of content. Reading through so many of the responses on Facebook and Twitter and all the forum posts, it seems to be a general consensus that Life is Feudal MMO was a brilliant idea, but the developers just weren't the people for it. They didn't listen to fans, they didn't keep updating it in the correct ways, they added things like microtransactions instead of easier crafting systems and UI. And because of this, players started to drop off. I remember when it came out, it was so active. And the game, the MMO, even became free to play. And can you guess how many people are playing it currently? 85. For a scale and a game this size, 85 players isn't even close, and it's so sad to see. Such a fantastic idea and some terrible implementation just caused this game to be way beyond anything that the developers could handle. And it's unfortunate. I don't necessarily think the entire blame is on the developers. Of course, financial situations are a big playing part, but I think some decisions were made down the road that you can obviously see by the responses of fans and players alike that they didn't agree with this. Now, the game will officially close on January the 18th of 2021. The servers will be shut down and it will no longer be playable. I mean, for me, this is a disappointment, but for some, they have put thousands of hours into this MMO, and if I'm going to be honest, hundreds of dollars of their own money. Whether that was a good decision or not, that's a debate that you have to have with yourself, but they're still losing that. And that's the thing with these online games. It doesn't matter how much money you throw at it, at the end of the day, it's all worthless as soon as the devs decided to shut it down. Will this mean that people will go back to Life is Feudal Your Own, the game that basically did what the MMO did, but on a smaller scale with smaller servers? Potentially. And it looks like it's going that way. The current player base has risen since the announcement of the MMO dying, and maybe we might actually get a revival of that, but I think it's past that point. When the developers announced the Life is Feudal MMO, they put all their eggs in one basket. They put all their development time and updates working on that MMO, and whilst there are a few updates for your own, they almost just abandoned it, which means it could be too late. They could turn it around and do a full No Man's Sky and make this incredible Life is Feudal Your Own game back to one of the biggest medieval sandbox RPGs out there. They could have players coming in fighting, building settlements, castles, armies, back like they did in 2015. But I think it's unlikely. Please let me know what your thoughts are on it. Did you play any of the Life is Feudal games, and what do you think the reasons are that people have turned against it? Because they have. Financials aside, the game was already abandoned by its players. People had had enough of it, and no one was really playing it anymore. And why do you think that is? But thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you leave a like on it. It helps more than you would ever know. But until then, I will see you in the next one.